So the other most common problem we face in hemophilia is fixed flexion deformity. So we have Dr. Judy and John. She is the best person to talk on fixed flexion deformity. And you must have heard her in the past. Actually, she has done a tremendous work in the hemophilia. Dr. Judy John is a professor, Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation, CMC Vellore, and she has got more than 25 publications in national and international journals, and she has contributed in the textbook chapters in about 4 textbook chapters. Dr. Judy, thank you.
Good afternoon. I really want to thank Dr. Chandrakala and her team for giving me this opportunity. Really, it's a privilege to be with this academic community, especially because of World Federation of Hemophilia. And I thought it's a very great idea to discuss problems looking at individual patients. And looks like the education video was on Tom, was someone who has left knee deformity. So we actually saw Tom hopping with his auxiliary crutches and his left knee was flexed. So keeping that education video and remembering Tom educational video, let's kind of very briefly look at a 25-year-old gentleman who comes with a left knee flexion deformity for 2 months. How do we manage this? So what I'll be doing is, again, just going back to how you would assess both by history, clinical examination, and the management. We'll just walk through mainly because of our experience that we've had with the work that has been here. We've struggled during times when prophylaxis has not been there, and we've had to deal with flexion deformity. And hopefully, as years go by, as prophylaxis improves, like you could see in the video, initially Tom was hopping with his knee flexed. Towards the end of the video, you can see his knee is all straight by the time he meets his hematologist. So it is still a fact that the reported children or people with knee flexion deformity varies from 5 to 95%. And what is worrying is how it impairs the individual from walking and hence in all other activities of their life. Now, why a knee flexion deformity following a bleed? And this is a concept which, by this picture, I would like to explain. When the knee is extended or neutral, the joint space is reduced or not as much as when the knee is flexed. And how do we get pain? It's the pain from a bleed happens when the capsule is stretched. So the capsule has the nociceptors, and that causes severe pain. And as a compensatory strategy to control pain, following a bleed, the individual will flex his knee, and you can see how the joint space opens up. And this really allows the volume of blood to be accommodated in the joint as maximum, and hence the stretch of the capsule is reduced. Now, the other factor that happens is when there's pain, the quadriceps muscle itself is inhibited, and at the same time, when the child is immobilized in a flex position, if you can see the muscle which runs posterior to the knee and is inserted onto the tibia is the hamstrings. So if the knee is kept bent and if the child or the adult has not received immediate factors, you can see how with time, the hamstring muscle is shortened, and over a period of time, the quadriceps is weakened. Now, just like that boy, Tom, who was walking on auxiliary crutches, if this boy starts walking, can you see what happens? The black line is the force that the ground, equal and opposite force that is there on our body. So what we call the ground reaction force. Every time we walk, there's a force that is there which moves upwards. And when the knee is in neutral, the quadriceps actually doesn't need to function. So when we are standing, we do not actually use your quadriceps because the ground reaction force is actually stabilizing our knee and we are not buckling. But when someone has a knee flexion deformity, the ground reaction force is posterior to the knee, and at this point, the quadriceps has to act and stabilize the individual on standing. And hence you can understand as the knee bends more, the amount of force. So those who are interested in physics, you can understand the distance which is away from the movement of the knee joint is much more, and hence the force that is required to stabilize the knee is much more higher. The chances of rebleed are much more higher when there is a knee deformity. Now, going on to the clinical presentation, this is the basics of all our medical work. We really need to understand what kind of joint this has been. So is this a joint which has been bleeding multiple times in the past? Was there any history of trauma? And was the joint a normal joint, or was it already an arthropathic joint? So that kind of information we'll have to get from the history. Then we'll go on to look at very briefly on the clinical examination and imaging, which would be very often just an X-ray, where you can pick up if there's a fall, was there a fracture, or is it just a joint which is arthropathic, or a joint which is got a lot of not too much of damage. So I think the most important thing is information. Just like the previous talk, the information was not very important, but I would say when there's a knee flexion deformity, the story behind that knee flexion deformity would be the most critical factor, which would help you manage this individual. So you're not only trying to get this knee straight, but also you're trying to understand what happened because of which this person is coming to you with a knee deformity. And again, the definition of bleed is given very clearly. In fact, they say, as soon as there is an aura, you don't even wait for a pain, but when there's an aura associated with increasing swelling or warm, increasing pain, and there is some range of motion loss or difficulty in using the limb, that is when you suspect an hemarthrosis. And factors, if the individual is not on prophylaxis, then immediate replacement of factors is required to prevent the individual from developing a knee deformity. Again, the history with regard to bleed frequency. So is it a target joint? So target joint is when there have been more than 3 bleeds in the last 6 months. Again, that is worrying. So has the knee been in a flex position because of previous bleeds, or it's a target joint and this deformity is a new deformity? That information will really be required to assess, to decide on your management. And this again, with regard to factor replacement, is a child on prophylaxis, or if the child is on episodic, what has been the response to the factor replacement? What are the managements which have been which the individual has had during the hemarthrosis in terms of rest, immobilization, compression, elevation? How is his pain now? And has he been on a regular exercise program for this joint and for the other joints? So it's important also to, when you're looking at the history about that joint, also to understand what's happening in the other joints, both the elbows and the same side ankle as well as the other side. The other information is also muscle bleeds, because we find that if you've had a psoas bleed, the quadriceps of that muscle is weakened because of the involvement of the lumbar plexus and the femoral nerve, and the tendency to a knee bleed and a knee deformity is very high. So getting that part of the story is very important. And when you look at the international classification of functioning, again, you're saying, okay, I want to not only look at the joint and not the left knee alone, I want to look at what's happening on the other joints. So even if you're not doing the hemophilia joint health score, getting an understanding of are there any other target joints is important. And how is the child? Is the child able to walk? Is a child, or this individual who's 25 years, has he completed his studies? What kind of vocation is he planning? Trying to understand him, because when the individual comes to you, this is a window for the physician to have a quick glance into his background. So you may not be able to completely know about his personal factors, the environmental factors, but again, compliance with therapy, compliance with, or is he just coming to you once his knee is straight, he'll just go back with his previous level of being not very good with his exercise program? those are glimpses which you need to understand so that he does not come back to you with rebleeds and further deformities subsequently. So this is again just translated in terms of hemophilia, where you're looking at the joint bleed and activities which get affected, as well as participation. Now, clinical examination is again the basic examination where just by looking at the joint and looking at the wasting, is this a joint which has had, sometimes they hesitant to tell you, that, no, I've just had 2 bleeds in the past and this 2-month deformity is for the first time. But by looking at the joint, you can make out, is this child had repeated bleeds in the past and there's significant wasting on that left side as compared to the right. Once there's swelling, you're thinking, is there synovitis? And is that the reason why the child is having repeated bleeds? Clinical examination again will confirm quite a bit of the synovitis. You look at tenderness, which will tell you, is there joint line tenderness? Is there arthritis with crepitus? Then you look at how much is the flexion deformity and what is the further flexion, because when there are repeated bleeds, it's not really the extension which is lost, but also the flexion. And then the muscle strength. And I put in sensation so that we can be mindful that if there has been a psoas bleed and there is a sensory problem, then you're thinking the quadriceps is not involved only because of the joint bleed, but also because neurological problem secondary to an earlier psoas bleed, which the individual very often doesn't even think important to present when they come to you. An ankle, because just like the other joint, other picture that you saw, you can see how this young boy's ankle is in equinus. So what happens if he's walking with his knee flexed to compensate for the length? So your leg is shortened, and to compensate for this apparent shortening, the ankle goes into equinus. And either there are bleeds in the ankle or the muscle, which is the gastrosoleus muscle, gets significantly shortened. So when you look at the joint range of motion, I just want to kind of bring this up. Very often, the child may be able to extend his knee only up to 30 degrees actively, but passively, we are able to bring it to neutral. So then at that point, you're saying that this is not a flexion deformity, this is more because of a weakness of the quadriceps. Okay, so actively the individual is able to extend the knee short of 30 degrees, but passively you're able to bring it to neutral, and this is only an extension lag. So just with strengthening, this should improve. But if you look below, this is more of a flexion deformity. Sometimes we use these two terms very interchangeably, flexion deformity, fixed flexion deformity. But classically, when we say it's a fixed flexion deformity, very often you see it when there is post-septic arthritis, or if there's an intra-articular fracture and the joint is really damaged. Again, remember, whenever you're examining the joint, if this is quite a joint which has been affected, you can see something called the posterior subluxation, where you can see the tibia is shifted posterior in comparison to the femur. Again, this tells you that it's severe damage, and this very often is because the hamstring is pulling the tibia down. And occasionally you will also see in your patients a valgus deformity. Now, the severity of this deformity tells you, okay, very often conservative management may be difficult when you get a triple deformity. And again, keeping this whole vicious cycle is important, because if you manage this child or this individual who's come with one left knee deformity, you are going to control this vicious cycle where you're going to prevent further bleeds, you're going to prevent that joint going into arthropathy. At the same time, you're going to prevent other joints going into arthropathy. So imaging, I just want to make a mention, whenever you take an X-ray of a flexion of an individual with a flexion deformity, it's very difficult to comment on the joint space. So if you look at this X-ray, there is an overlap of the femoral condyles and the tibial condyles, and it's really hard to comment on the joint space. But if there's a lot of joint erosions and just articular cyst, you can say that this joint is quite bad. Lateral view sometimes gives you a better idea about what's happening. The patellofemoral joint space is reduced, But if you look at the tibiofemoral, you can say that probably there is some space between the two condyles. Now, going on to the management, non-operative therapy is what we would always begin, and that is the program where you're working on strengthening the quadriceps, you're working on stretching the hamstrings. The therapists who are comfortable actually do a joint mobilization. They try and do a traction where you're pulling, you're applying traction kit to try and gently use a force to extend the knee. And again, a therapist who's trained is able to do it very gradually and progressively without factor cover. And I will just present a few data how we are able to get some of these joints, actually the joints which are less than 30 degrees, into good correction just with non-operative therapy. A few of them would need to go on to serial casting, casting under anesthesia. There are serial stretching orthoses which have been described again. The serial casting was something which was started when there were very limited options with regard to surgical. So now that factors are more available, these options are definitely are there, but the clinician and the team with the therapist have to decide whether the individual can, how long to try, because when you're saying serial casting, we're saying we're changing the cast every week and we're trying to achieve at least 5 degrees of correction in the knee deformity. And this is done by after the therapy, trying to get the child or the individual to extend the knee and then applying a cast. If the knee deformity is less than 20, we put a walking sole and the individual is able to walk. We also get the child to do isometric strengthening as well as we do electrical stimulation within the cast. Now, casting under anesthesia is very similar, but the advantage is there is no pain, so the child or the individual does not resist the casting, which is being done in the maximum available extension. So always a measurement, and casting under anesthesia is always done under factor cover. And so a very gentle force is applied suprapatellar and an opposite pressure in the tibial region to get correction. And the important thing is post cast, there is wasting. So the knee needs to be supported with a knee brace till the quadriceps strength is improved. This is just an example of a splint, which can be tried where you have the thigh component and the tibial component, and then there's a telescoping rod. With time, you can extend the knee. Again, these have to be tried, and the forces that are required to extend the knee can vary depending upon the severity of the joint involvement and the arthropathy. But generally, when the clinical examination is done, very often if there's a very when there's a reasonable end feel and you feel that some give is possible, it is worth trying non-operative treatment. But if you find that the contracture has been more than 60 degrees and there's not much of difference coming with non-operative, the operative is definitely needs to be considered. What we have found with our experience particular is the younger children below 15 years seem to respond better with non-operative treatment as compared to individual above 15 years. So operative treatment would again range from soft tissue release to a knee joint replacement. Soft tissue release again is done very occasionally because by the time we have tried all the non-operative techniques, we know it's a capsular contracture and a significant damage in the joint space for which the individual needs a supracondylar osteotomy, and that is what has come done regularly here. External fixator is another method by which there are a gradual extension of the knee can be obtained, and when the joint is really bad, again for this, because he's 25 years, very unusual that we would have to try that. Now, I've just brought this slide again just for us to remember it is not only the knee flexion deformity we are correcting, but also to remember that we need to strengthen the muscle, whatever we do at the end of non-operative or operative, till the muscles are strong enough that we would say an MRC grade above 3 the child will always need an orthosis, or the individual will need an orthosis for walking. Now, this is just a retrospective analysis of what we've done with regard of what we've analyzed with our individuals who we've done treatment for knee flexion deformity. So we can see the number of knees that we treated from 13 to 16 was 55, and they were, most of them is severe. We actually had a few with inhibitors, and the knee deformity varied from 1 month to 154 months, so very wide range. But we found 12 of them we were able to correct just with therapy. And now we've said, we've kind of agreed that target correction is when we get less than 10 degrees. Functional correction is when it's less than 20, so they're able to walk. So we were able to achieve this in about 27% of individuals. Similarly, serial casting also, those who did not correct with physiotherapy underwent serial casting, and we found that about 35% of them who underwent serial casting, we got a functional correction. Casting under anesthesia with those who failed serial casting, again, a good number responded, and at the end of it, 7 out of the 55 needed surgery. But you can see the advantage of the surgery is, although there are the cost of factors and the cost of hospital stay and surgery, there is definitely a better target correction of less than 10 degrees. So this, again, we've looked at it. If it's less than 30,
Dr. Judy,
about
we are running short of time. Dr. Judy,
Sure.
we are running short of time. Yeah, I just, if you can finish in 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
You know, that's okay. I'm this is my probably the last 2 slides. So you can just see less than 30 non-operative management is definitely an option. Beyond that, till about 60, you can try. Now again, this is again just to remind us that even when we look at the joint, please remember it's an opportunity for regular follow-up and see, even after you've corrected the deformity, can you prevent further arthropathy? Can you, how much can you maximize the individual's level of functioning, and with return to his work? And I think these are all very close to us as rehab specialists. But we find that this really makes a difference, and they really listen to physicians in terms of a little advice that you give, in terms of, even though you may have a social worker or a separate team member, but these are little opportunities to encourage the individual to return to a vocation, and other individuals who've had knee deformity correction also help in this process. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Judy, for a very comprehensive lecture. And I'm sure, at least I hope, some physiotherapists and physical therapists and rehabilitative medicine people have been in the audience who would have definitely benefited. There are a couple of questions, but they are not related to your topic. So there is one question regarding the use of Hemlibra. So this is from Dr. Pooja Baradia. So Dr. Pooja, what we'd like to tell you is that in May, we are going to have a follow-up session of this same thing, where we will be discussing Hemlibra in detail. There'll be a separate lecture on it, and I hope you will attend, so you will be able to get all the information. There's also another question regarding how to manage target joints and to please guide about synovectomy. So that is part of our next lecture, which will be given by Dr. Mohanty. And I'm sure if you still have questions, we will be able to answer you. So again, regarding arthrocentesis and chronic arthropathy. So Dr. Mohanty will be dealing with the other 2 questions.